Hi, I'm Tom Bolden, 10 Mile Distillery's whiskey aficionado and history buff. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to talk to you a bit about the inspiration behind the latest release of our Revolutionary War whiskey series, the Battle of Harlem Heights. You know, when you think about the battles that have kind of formed the United States, you think about the big ones, Normandy, Yorktown, those kind of battles. But sometimes history kind of pivots on the smaller ones, the battles when it's just enough just to survive and get through. And Harlem Heights was just one of those. It was the opportunity for George Washington and his troops to prove to themselves that they had what it takes to fight against some of the greatest trained military personnel in the world.
By the fall of 1776, the American Revolution was in serious trouble. The British had sent their biggest army ever, 32,000 soldiers under General William Howe, to crush the rebellion. Washington had about 19,000 men on paper, but a lot of them were inexperienced militia who'd barely held a musket before. The summer had been brutal. At the Battle of Long Island in late August, the Continental Army was devastated, losing over 1,000 men in a humiliating defeat. Only Washington's gutsy middle-of-the-night escape across the East River saved his army from complete destruction. Things got even worse on September 15th, when the British launched an amphibious assault at Kips Bay in Manhattan. The American troops basically panicked and ran. Washington rode into the chaos and was so furious he threw his hat on the ground and yelled, "Are these the men with whom I am to defend America?" You can't really blame him for being upset. His army was retreating up Manhattan with the confident British on their heels. Everyone figured the rebellion would be over in a matter of a few days. For Washington, that insult was the last straw. He could have kept retreating and saved his army for another day, but he sensed this was the moment to act. His men's morale was very low. They needed a win to believe in themselves again. Washington decided to fight, but he was smart about it. He had part of his forces engage British head-on while Knowlton's Rangers and Major Anthony Leach's Virginians snuck through the woods to hit them from the side. This wasn't a desperate Hail Mary. It was a sophisticated tactical move that needed good timing, coordination, and initiative. This is everything people said the Americans didn't have. Right away, tragedy struck when both Knowlton and Leach were fatally wounded. In most armies, that would have been game over, but the Americans kept going, with junior officers and even sergeants stepping up to lead. And then something incredible happened. For the first time in the whole New York campaign, British regulars retreated from advancing Americans. Washington stopped at Harlem Heights, an area of high ground with thick woods and ravines that finally offered some decent defensive ground. But he knew just sitting there wasn't going to be enough. His men needed proof they could win a fight, and they needed it now. That morning, he sent Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Knowlton's Rangers on a scouting mission. Around 10 o'clock, they ran into British light infantry. As the Americans fell back, the British chased them, and one of their buglers played a hunting call. The British were mocking Washington's soldiers, treating them like animals to be hunted as sport. Washington saw his chance and went for it. Instead of just being happy the enemy was backing off, he ordered a full advance. For nearly 2 hours, the same Continental soldiers who had run away in terror just the day before were now chasing British troops across Manhattan, cheering the whole time. You could hear their shouts echoing, letting the rest of the army know that something had fundamentally changed. When British reinforcements started showing up, Washington showed some serious discipline and called off the chase. His men came back to their positions exhausted but victorious. The casualties were light, with about 30 Americans versus 60 to 90 British. Psychological impact was huge. Almost immediately, everything shifted. Soldiers who had been ready to desert were suddenly eager to fight again. Discipline got better, fewer people ran off, and militiamen who might have gone home decided to stick around. Washington's reputation, which had taken a beating after Long Island and Kips Bay, was restored. His men had watched him make bold decisions, take risks right alongside them, and deliver a victory exactly when they needed it most. The British reaction was significant too. Howe, who had been aggressively chasing the Americans up Manhattan, suddenly got more cautious after Harlem Heights. The fact that American soldiers might not just scatter at the sight of British bayonets forced them to rethink their whole approach. Meanwhile, word spread fast through the colonies. Newspapers covered the fight, giving the Continental Congress something positive to report and boosting public confidence in independence. The battle didn't change the big picture. The British still held New York and were still way stronger in terms of numbers and resources. But Harlem Heights broke the pattern of American defeats and retreats. It proved the Continental Army could adapt, pull off complex maneuvers, and face Britain's best troops without falling apart. Washington's decision showed that small victories, carefully chosen and well executed, could keep the whole revolution going. The leadership lessons are still in practice today. Washington understood that morale mattered just as much as strategy. He adapted his tactics to fit his men and the terrain instead of forcing them into formations they weren't trained for. He led from the front, sharing the danger and showing his commitment. And maybe most importantly, he knew when to quit while he was ahead. By stopping the pursuit before his army got overextended, he kept the win without risking disaster. Sometimes keeping a revolution alive doesn't depend on huge victories. Sometimes it's about grabbing those small moments that restore faith, confidence, and the will to keep fighting. Harlem Heights was one of those moments. It showed that the Continental Army could fight, that George Washington could lead, and that Americans' fight for independence wasn't over yet.